before we get started with the Cardiac Care Committee, as a reminder to all the Cardiac Care Committee members, as well as the audience, these are recorded, and apparently last time we didn't do a very good job of speaking clearly into the microphones, and so if we could do that, that would be helpful. So we'll go ahead and start the Cardiac Care Committee meeting. And the first thing I want to do is everyone on the committee should have in front of them, I placed out some handouts from which include the minutes from our last meeting, as well as the printouts of what we submitted or what I submitted on your behalf to DSHS. One thing to note on one of them that you'll see it fills the majority of the comments section. Bottom right corner, there's a little plus. There was more to the submission than wound up printing. I apologize for that. I didn't realize until after I had printed them. I probably should have clicked on that, opened up the rest of it, and printed it as well, but I didn't notice that until too late, so I apologize to the committee. We'll be going through these later on in the agenda. And we've got some, so the first thing on our agenda is announcements of the changes to the committee membership for 2012. And where is that? There it is. And beginning January 2012, Dr. Smalling, sitting directly to my right, will become the chair. Chris Briggs will continue. So actually, Jane, I'm having a little trouble understanding what the notes are on this. It has all the names of our current committee members, but there should be.
That's just, I believe, your sign-in sheet.
Right, but isn't there? Okay, so first thing on the agenda is discuss the changes in the committee. I don't have the new names.
Did you have a certificate, I believe, in front of you? It's a blue folder. So you have a one individual
Yes,
that's rotating.
This is for somebody who was on the stroke committee.
Oh, all right, then that's not yours.
Okay, we'll tell you what. Maybe we'll see if during the
That
meeting.
will be your agenda item then. That's your change. Is that Dr. Smalling will now be your chair?
And the agenda item is that Dr. Richard Smalling will be the new chair effective January 2012. Thank you, Dr. Smalling. So next on the agenda is the revisions that we, the Cardiac Care Committee, submitted. To remind folks, we had a couple of meetings, one in Houston and then another one here in Austin, which were special add-on meetings to review Chapter 157, and we came up with a number of recommendations. I'm going to read basically from our minutes because I think that summarizes it the best. But for the committee members are all aware of this. But for the audience, basically, the recommendations to the current rule that we discussed and put forward were that we would be recommending to DSHS that all ALS provider units that respond to 911 calls, emergency requests, be equipped with 12-lead ECG acquisition devices. We also requested that there would be a requirement for all ALS provider agencies that have units responding to 911 calls, participate in their local RAC. We already know, as a side note, we already know from previous presentations that all RACs in Texas have some sort of either a cardiac care committee or an acute care committee or some specific committee that the 911 provider agencies could report to in terms of cardiac care. We're also going to recommend that there be a requirement that all paramedical providers in Texas continue to have national registry certification in order to maintain their state certification. We actually then, as I'm looking for our notes, and I'd forgotten this, to be perfectly honest, we removed that from our recommendation as we felt it was more appropriate that it come from the Education Committee, which was also addressing it. So we endorsed that, but my understanding is that the Education Committee was going to be discussing that. We felt that was more appropriate for them. We also are going to require that all paramedic providers maintain proficiency in ACLS as demonstrated by evidence of a current ACLS training to the provider level. And those were basically our recommendations, as I recall. Committee members, correct me. We went through and submitted those basic recommendations actually in several parts of the rule, because as you know, some parts of the rule speak to a fixed wing, some parts of the rule speak to a rotor wing, and some parts of the rule speak to ground units. And so we basically try to make it apply to all units, regardless of the actual mode of transportation. So in summary, it was make sure that everyone had the ability to acquire a 12 lead. The provider agencies reported to the RACs that, and that providers would maintain proficiency in ACLS, and we would endorse a recommendation from the Education Committee if they decide to go forward with it about National Registry certification be a requirement for continued state certification. Committee members, does that sound about right? Okay.
Can we go a little deeper into one? On the recommendation we made under 15711 EMS provider licensing in the cardiac monitor defibrillator, 12-lead ECG device, DC battery-powered monitor defibrillator, 12-lead acquisition device with paper printout, accessories, and supplies with sufficient power supply to meet needs of the mission, and the device or personnel have the ability to communicate the results. So not just that the 12-lead will be on there, but they also have the ability to communicate the results.
That's correct.
Yeah. And then on the these recommendations, are we going to cover these separately on the STEMI system criteria?
Yeah, I suppose we should. So one of them, to Rule 157.123, the regional EMS trauma, the regional emergency medical services / trauma systems part of the rule, we actually had quite a bit, and this is the part where I don't have the addition. And Christine, did you happen to have that?
No,
Nope, you don't have it
I
either?
don't.
Okay. So the recommendation was that the RACs would establish and maintain a system of care for cardiac patients, includes STEMI receiving center criteria. Their STEMI receiving center, there would be a STEMI receiving center on-site surgery, and that facility would be meet the current specialty society recommendations set forth in nationally recognized evidence-based STEMI care guidelines, including the capability for on-site emergency cardiac surgery, and would actively participate in the appropriate regional advisory council and regularly submit data to an approved data collection tool and the department as requested. That would be DSHS. And the recommended criteria at this level would include 24/7 primary PCI capability, cardiac cath lab ready within 30 minutes of activation, universal acceptance of STEMI patients by the facility with no diversion, and protocols in place for diagnosis, triage, acceptance of transfer patients, activation of the cardiac catheterization and STEMI team with a single phone call or pager system and capability for pre-hospital activation of cardiac catheterization lab. The facility volume would include greater than 200 PCIs annually, including greater than 36 primary PCI with acceptable quality metrics. The availability within 30 minutes of activation of a qualified interventional cardiologist. And that interventional cardiologist would have an annual PCI operator volume of greater than 75 procedures per year, and an annual primary PCI volume of greater than 11 with acceptable quality metrics. There would be physician and non-physician STEMI coordinator to provide oversight, be responsible for data collection, analysis, and feedback. The site would participate in an approved data collection tool. It would maintain monthly multidisciplinary team meetings open to pre-hospital care providers to review facility performance and identify system shortcomings in order to implement solutions to improve care. There would be on-site cardiac surgical capabilities available 24/7, an appropriately staffed and trained cardiac intensive care unit capable of managing STEMI patients, including the need for pharmacologic or mechanical hemodynamic support and advanced arrhythmia detection and treatment, and a plan for triage and treatment of simultaneous presentation of STEMI patients. We also went on with a STEMI center, no on-site surgery. That is where it got cut off on this printing, but it basically maintained, as I recall, it maintained all of the same criteria with the exception of the on-site surgery.
Right, and to have a plan in place, if there's not on-site backup surgery, to have a plan in place to transfer that patient if that was needed.
Great, thank you. That was an important one, oversight on my part. Other comments on that from anybody? All right.
Jane, after these recommendations are made, what is the process subsequently?
Well, the way we anticipate that it will go from here, Dr. Smalling, is that we've received all of the input from the committees. Then, beginning in December, the internal department staff will start to go through all of the suggestions in the rules section by section. And we will make the changes and updates that we feel like we can make. We'll incorporate suggestions from the committees if we feel that we can support those things. Once we have a relatively good draft, then it goes to our general counsel. General counsel has to approve the language of the rule before it goes forward. Once we've done that, then we'd like to have a joint committee meeting at some point. We're looking probably at the earliest September, October of 12. Where everyone comes together and we go through the rule pretty much line by line so everyone can see what has been included in it and get feedback at that time. After that, it will still come back to the committees and go through the council. That's the plan as it stands today. That plan can change based on demands of the department, such as hurricanes, disaster response that we have to respond to, and so forth. So that's our best guesstimate at this point in time. Questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so the next thing we have on the agenda is an update and report from the American Heart Association on a number of items. AHA's Regional ST Segment Elevation, Myocardial Infarction STEMI System Field Guide, AHA Legislative Update, AHA's Action Registry Data Report for Texas, and the AHA's Administrative Secretary, the Caruth Grant Foundation Update. It says AHA staff.
The first item on the agenda, the field guide, that's actually a regional field guide that was developed by the CATRAC Cardiac Care Committee. It was born out of a need to house all of the projects, all of the documents that had been created by the Cardiac Care Committee in the Austin region. It's a large field guide. I actually meant to bring a bunch of copies with me, and I left them in my other car, so I'll bring them next meeting, I promise. But you can access them. The electronic field guide is available at catrac.org, catrac.org. There's a Mission Lifeline section at the CATRAC website, and you can click into that and download the field guide. My thanks to Dave Reimer, Michelle Philman, Robin, Wiatrack, who have been great to allow us some space on the CATRAC website for those types of things. The field guide contains items like the protocols that were developed, STEMI protocols that were developed for the non-PCI centers, the transfer centers, EMS protocols, the assessments that were used in the region, the STEMI assessments that were used for PCI hospitals, non-PCI hospitals, and EMS. QI subgroup has done some tremendous work, and they have some best practice documents that we were able to include in the field guide. We have a 12-lead ECG accuracy project going on in the region, and that information is in there as well. So it's available for your use. If you can't find it, you can email me, and I'll send you a copy. Lonnie.den@heart.org. The next item is the AHA legislative update. For those of you who don't know Joel Romo, he is director, or actually I think senior director of advocacy for the American Heart Association, and he's here to update us on some work that he's doing on our behalf. So thanks for being here, Joel.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for being here. And most of all, thank you for the work you do back in your hometowns, and all the work you do for the state of Texas. As Lonnie mentioned, the American Heart Association Governmental Relations team wanted to provide you, the Cardiac Care Committee today, an update as well as a general audience of some initiatives that we're taking on behalf of some of the work you're doing. With the legislature not returning, hopefully, until 2013, they are currently going under or doing some interim studies both in the House and Senate. And those are pretty much their homework assignments to study issues that are critical to the state of Texas as they start looking at policies for the 2013 or future sessions. The House has already released their interim studies, but what the American Heart Association did is we thought about an opportunity that we had with the Texas Senate. The Senate will release their interim studies. We're expecting end of the year, maybe first of the year. And visiting with some volunteers and with internally, we thought it might be a good idea to put some language out there to the Senate to discuss the creation of a statewide system, STEMI systems of care, that would get the dialogue at least moving forward. We put some language together based on our guidelines and actually our AHA journal that lays out the way a STEMI, a statewide or a STEMI system of care should be created. It lists all the stakeholders, everything that should look at. Obviously, we felt that this might be an opportunity, as Dr. Ed Rock used to say, have everybody's nose under the tent. We visited with some lawmakers, and we had a couple of senators submit that language to the lieutenant governor. Since then, we have had a couple calls from the lieutenant governor's office asking for more information. We've given them the names of a couple of you on the committee. I don't know if you've been followed through by the lieutenant governor's office with some phone calls. We're not guaranteed to get that interim charge. They had over 700 requests for different policies to look at. Everything, not just healthcare, everything from transportation to the fires to the economy to employment, et cetera. So, you know, they're digging through all that. We feel good that we may get that interim charge, and if we were to get that interim charge, it would be most likely through the Senate Health and Human Service Committee, which is chaired by Senator Jay Nelson. The way we asked the Senate staff to look at this issue was that if we secured the interim charge, that they work closely with the Cardiac Care Committee as far as information that they may need to gather. We know you cannot lobby and you can't advocate for anything, but there might be other volunteers or organizations within the audience that might be willing to come testify or share information with committee members or legislators. Obviously, DISHES is going to be a very critical player in this. We understand that their budget is tying their hands in sense of FTEs, but we wanted to get that discussion out there now so that the legislature can start looking at this issue. We want to work with the RACs. We want to work with the Air Ambulance. Heart Association wants to make sure everybody's at the table. And whether this is an issue that comes up in 2013 or 2015, at least we have the discussion taking place already. So all that to say is all I'm here to share with you on behalf of the American Heart Association, and we did submit that language for consideration by the Texas Senate. We won't know if we get it approved, most likely to the end of the year, first of the year. And if we do get that interim hearing or interim charge, we'd ask that all folks that are passionate about this issue contact either yourselves or myself, and we can start working with the committees to start educating these lawmakers. That's what we figured. This is a perfect opportunity to educate them about everything from what a STEMI is, to the work you're doing in the field, to what it may be what the needs are to create a statewide system of care. And what a better time to have those discussions when there's not a hearing that's rushed for during a regular session. During the interim, obviously, you have a little bit more time to make your case, more opportunity to visit with lawmakers in district, more time to share what the success stories that are happening in San Antonio, Dallas, wherever with these lawmakers, and even have them come to visit some of these areas. So if there are any questions, I'm here to answer them, but that's our legislative report at this time.
So Joel, for those of us who are members of the Heart Association, would we be able to discuss these issues as a citizen
Absolutely.
with those involved? Okay.
Absolutely. You could wear your AHA hat.
Fine. Thank you.
Any other questions for Joel? Appreciate that very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for being here. Okay. Dr. Robert Wozniak is an interventional cardiologist, a member of this committee, and AHA volunteer, also is chairing the QI subgroup of this committee, and he's going to give a data update. So where do we stand as a state in terms of STEMI data, and where do we want to be?
Hello, good afternoon. I have the privilege of presenting some of the data that Tim Mixon, he couldn't be here today, so he was able to present some data at the STEMI Texas conference in August that Scott and White put on, and Lonnie was kind enough to prepare a lot of slides for me to help with this presentation, and I'll try to make it as brief so we can leave room for comment. The purpose of this is more of for your information, and it also points out some of the limitations that we have with our management of data. As we know, it's so important for us to have data to reflect on how well we're doing. And some of the background of the data is that we have in Texas is that we rely a lot on the CMS data. A lot of it is not timely. We may find out things 3 years later that we wish that we would have learned sooner so we could have had made an impact. And a lot of that data is very lumped in data so that it's hard for us to drill down into issues where we can make a difference, whether the place where we're falling behind may be a pre-hospital part or in-hospital part, but it's more of a composite. And then a lot of the data, it doesn't really capture some of the centers that may need some of these data feedback the most, some of these lower volume centers. So the most current map we have for a data set that we do have access to is to get with the guidelines. And see, Texas is fairly well represented here, and I feel that it will continue to be well represented moving forward. So if we start looking at some of the data that we have, it's just curious about what percentage of patients are being transferred who have STEMI via EMS transfer, and it looks like in Texas about 51, and for the United States population that's a part of this database, about 58, so 50 to 60%. And it just goes to make sense that our improvements that we've seen here on the slide are lower curve going up for Texas. Our ability, if we're getting patients to the hospital with EMS, we've been doing a much better job of using that time wisely and obtaining a pre-hospital ECG. So the ECGs obtained is one of our charges, I know, as a system, is trying to make sure we're utilizing that information wisely. Now, this is a complicated slide, and I want to just walk some through. Some may be used to seeing it, but we have different times here as far as quarters, and then for quarter one of 2011, and then here's this simple time interval. But these different colored bars represent different stages. Here's where a patient is trying to represent having and figuring out, I had my onset of pain, and where do I finally figure out that I pulled the trigger, and I've called EMS, in this case, because this is for patients with a STEMI who are going to be transferred by EMS. So here we are, we have our symptoms. I finally figure out I better call EMS, and they get their EKG here. Now this is the time, this doesn't show up well, but there's a separation here. This 24 and 25, 24, this is the transfer time as far as the logistical distance or time it takes to get someone who recognizes their symptoms, and the EMS gets their EKG, and they transfer to the hospital. Here's the emergency room time on this bar. This is the time it takes to get from the emergency room to the cath lab, and here's the time it takes for the cath lab personnel to actually open up the artery. So we'll have another slide that has a similar layout. For these patients who are transferred via EMS, what we're finding out is that their door-to-balloon time is 66 minutes, which again, our goal, obviously, when they hit the door, we really want it to be under 90 minutes, so you feel, wow, what a nice cushion that we have here for the quarter one, and it's been improving gradually over time here. But in our first medical contact to balloon time, 98 minutes, our goal is going to be under 90 minutes, but certainly we want it under 120 minutes. So we feel very good about these patients who were having symptoms, were smart enough to call EMS, and were sent to the hospital, and they went via EMS to the hospital, and we hope that the EMS were able to utilize that information to give the hospital a heads up. If we're talking about inter-hospital transfer in some of the places that you may represent, you have to actually add 95 minutes for those patients who would first end up in a non-PCI or a non-STEMI receiving center. And so there's certainly room for improvement. So keep this number in mind that I have here, the door-to-balloon time of 66 minutes if you're smart enough to use EMS, and contrast that with if you were not smart enough to use EMS, the door-to-balloon time of 76 minutes. So you lose 10 minutes, and 10 minutes when you're having probably some of the worst pain of your life could make a huge difference too. And as you know, if you've been there, we do have a time window where we can make a huge impact, where it literally means life and death. Other interesting observation here, and I'm going to go back to this at the end of this presentation, that the time it took them to actually make the decision to get into the hospital or actually get to the hospital is over 100 minutes, 120 minutes. Some graphs here that follow on the minutes on this side and just different intervals here, quarterly intervals, for the median time for the first medical contact to the primary PCI. And this is the entire STEMI population, that we see that the United States on the lower curve and Texas on the upper curve here, we're well within range of what we're seeing in the United States based on this data set here. For the patients who present for first medical contact to primary PCI within 90 minutes, so this is the percent. How good are we doing here in Texas? 52% that we're getting there within 90 minutes versus in the United States, 57, so well within the range of what we're seeing elsewhere, which is encouraging. The patients now that are getting transferred in from non-PCI hospitals, one thing I want to point out that I've noticed on this data that was actually encouraging, not that long ago, 2010, it was taking 138 minutes, and then this great big learning curve going down about 20 minutes here, that where we were figuring it out better. And again, I think that's a reflection of all your work out there of trying to make the system work better, eliminating the time, the confusion, the chaotic nature that comes up with getting these patients from a non-PCI hospital to a PCI hospital. It sort of flattens out here, but we still have room to go compared to, we're doing a nice job here compared to what we're seeing with in the United States. But interestingly, only under a third of the time, are we able to get this done within 90 minutes, and 55% within 120 minutes. There's been a recent article we want to bring to your attention that really comes out of the race intervention, as well as some other United States influences here as far as how to get patients in that referring hospital door in and door out. And so this is sort of another phrase that will kind of catch on here, door in and door out time, the focus on how we can do that better with some of their interventions, some of which we are doing now, is that they were able to decrease their time from their referring hospital door in and door out by 29 minutes. Just a couple of door-to-balloon time non-transfer patients here, Texas on the top and the United States on the bottom here, well within range, and similar, the overall door-to-balloon time percentage within 90 minutes, within the 92, very similar. This is another recent article that you see how has your work been doing over the years for decreasing door-to-balloon time, going down from 96 minutes down to 64, and we see that the percent of times that we're actually able to get the patient's door-to-balloon time under 90 minutes going way to 91%. This mortality data here is from the action registry itself, showing that the mortality data here in Texas, United States, seems to be very similar. Some of the programs that I have seen presentations or read their mortality data have actually been able to improve upon this, and that's always our goal. These are some of the sample reports that you may get from the Action Registry. Many of you will understand or see those already, but you can get these for your system, where you could be one letter of your system, and this would represent your entire system. We encourage, or I personally encourage that for Texas, because this will give us even more confidence in the data and not just select sites. Here would be some individual ways that you can compare yourself with what goes on in the United States. So these system reports, really want to kind of plug this, is that if we're able to get enough of your systems in one collection of Action Registry, you can actually have your own systems report for your Mission Lifeline system, so you can see how your system, not just your individual facility, how your system is doing. And so there is a fee, a one-time fee for your system of $500 to get this done. So we would encourage you to certainly consider that, because I personally see the value of that for your system. So in closing, there's challenges that we still have to increasing the public awareness as far as symptom recognition, to knowing which way to get to the hospital. We feel that the EMS, we want to make sure that they have EKG capability and be able to use that EKG wisely. We even want to dive into the possibility of having diversion protocols in the right circumstances. The challenges and goals for the emergency department, certainly in the referring centers, for the improving their door in and door out time, the STEMI receiving centers, it's really a matter of data collection and trying to be the backbone behind that, so that we can be confident on our data. And we know that these points are important. Let me just bring home this one point. I'm sorry this doesn't project well, but Dr. James McCarthy, and I think Dr. Smalling certainly knows about this and has played a role in this, was able to dive into this action data and bring out some interesting points that is very pertinent to us. And I just bring his conclusions that what they found was that the patients who were presenting by EMS seem to be sicker patients who have a higher mortality. And even though they are coming by EMS, so the best way to get to the hospital, the fastest, the most efficient way, they're still dying at a much higher rate than we would like to see. And so it makes us want us to think about having better access, or maybe even think of a better way to take care of these patients besides what we're already doing. And so for me, this is a good example of being able to look at data from the 20,000-foot view and making some perhaps changes on how you already do things and how this data can impact change for the better. And I will stop at that. And Richard, if you have any comments on that, I kind of glossed that over in the interest of time.
Okay, Robert. Interestingly, you showed nice decreases in door-to-balloon time and nice increases in mortality, which is the paradox that is becoming more and more obvious. And so what Dr. McCarthy looked at was about 24,000 patients in the Action Registry, and they found that 60% were brought in by EMS units. And in that group that were brought in by the EMS, there was a 10% incidence of cardiogenic shock. And the mortality, as you saw, was about 6 to 7%, which is what the Action Registry is pretty much holding up with in the United States. If they walked in, then their mortality was 2% in hospital mortality, and the incidence of shock was also 2%. So, as you said, it appears that EMS, patients who pick EMS tend to be a little sicker, or a lot sicker, than the ones who just walk in. And the other important piece of information that was recently presented was, actually at the ACC, was that despite significant decreases in door-to-balloon times in the United States, the mortality rates have not changed. And that's in the Action Registry, 44,000 patients, and in Michigan, 8,000 patients, back by the same results. And so it gets back to, it's not just getting the balloon up. It's really reperfusing the artery as fast as possible. In our own experience in Houston, when we were able to do pre-hospital half-dose fibrinolysis, we had a mortality rate of 2.7% in the hospital, in-hospital mortality 2.7%, and when we had to stop that process for a variety of reasons, our mortality has picked up to 10% with the same system in place, with the exception that we're not giving lytics in the field. And so certainly our door-to-balloon times and our patency rates have not changed in the hospital, but the pre-hospital patency is a lot less than it was when we were giving fibrinolytics. So additionally, after we stopped, the mortality increased and the incidence of shock increased on arrival from 2% to 20%. So it goes along with this selection of really sick patients who call 911. So we really, instead of looking at a door-to-balloon time, we really need to look at ischemic time. And in the best of all possible worlds, that needs to be less than 60 minutes, and certainly less than 120. So I think the clouds are parting, and we're beginning to see really what the true goal needs to be, and then we need to move on from there.
It sounds like, in trauma we talked about the golden hour. It sounds like we need to start thinking about that from a cardiac standpoint too. From the onset of symptoms to artery patency needs to be less than an hour. And you're nodding your head yes, but the challenge is if the patient chews up 45 minutes of that trying to figure out whether or not they're having a heart attack, and that was the value for the people who called 911, which turned out to be the sicker cohort, right? So if even, in the best of worlds, if people are spending, and maybe that's just, as their heart attack evolves, it goes from a little bit of pain to a little more pain to enough pain that I'm paying attention to, enough pain that I pick up the phone and call 911. If that takes 45 minutes of the golden hour, we've really got our backs against the wall. So. Lonnie, did you have more?
Yeah, one more. Thank you for that, Dr. Wozniak. It's great information. We have from Dallas County, Russell Griffin. He is involved with our Caruth grant project there. As many of you know, we were able to, kind of a dream came true, and we had a foundation that funded $3.5 million to Dallas County to implement a STEMI system of care there. And Russell is the EMS liaison. He's a paramedic, and he's one of those crazy guys who still flies in his spare time, I think on the weekends, with an air medical unit out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I appreciate you being here. Russell's going to present what's going on there, present some data from that system. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. I appreciate y'all allowing us to present this afternoon. We're excited to share some of this information. The grant is actually a $3.5 million 2-year grant where we're implementing a STEMI system of care, but on the backside doing a major body of analysis on the progress that we've made. We're actually 13 months in, so we're well into our operations phase, so we actually have some robust information to share with you. Prior to the beginning of the grant, we had 25 representative EMS agencies inside of Dallas County. 24 EMS agencies actually elected to participate inside of the grant themselves under MOU. We had 5 competing hospital systems, which comprised 15 major hospitals. Prior to the grant, 14 of those hospitals were providing primary PCI care, and only 3 of the hospitals had actually prearranged EMS activation processes in the field. The rest of the facilities did not. EKG transmission capabilities were pretty much did not exist. When they changed from the analog to digital system, many of the EMS providers were no longer able to transmit over the small Bluetooth cell phones and had to upgrade. Minimal coordination led to a lot of issues, we found out. Inability for transmit of EKGs, a lack of a STEMI protocol set that was common between any of the facilities. There was absolutely no QA or QI. We had one agency that was providing a good feedback loop for STEMI patients. And overall, and I can assure you through an evaluation that we did of 1,500 providers, that's 900 paramedics and the remainder being hospital staff, there was a complete misunderstanding as far as the processes of STEMI care. Could we activate a cath lab? How do we activate the cath lab? What happens if we activate the cath lab? The data was all over the place. So we realized really quick that our education problem was going to be inside of processes. And we obviously had a complete lack of data inside of Dallas County, and we found that out really quickly. Quarter 1 of 2011, our first complete robust data set, we were very scared to find out that 30% of our patients These are primary non-transfer PCI patients that are arriving either by EMS or walking in the front door. We're not achieving a door-to-balloon time of 90 minutes. And even scarier than that, 15% of those were over 120 minutes. So we realized that we were well below the national average, well below the state's average. Inside of Dallas County, that compromises a lot of work. And this is aggregate data for all 15 hospitals that were involved. As of Q2 of this year, we've already reduced that to 22%, but as you can see, we still have a lot of work to go. Progress in year one. We have implemented through our protocol subcommittee complete protocol sets for both STEMI and primary PCI, non-PCI, as well as EMS protocols. We also required the implementation of our hospitals for a Plan B protocol for fibrinolysis in the event of some sort of cath lab emergency, cath lab's full, disaster or whatnot. I'm glad to say as of our last protocol subcommittee meeting this month that all 15 hospitals have adopted these protocol sets. So we currently have all 15 hospitals as well as 24 of the EMS providers using identical protocol sets with very similar terminology in regards to activation of the cath labs and et cetera. The individual challenge, we realized really quick that we were doing an education plan. Quite frankly, when you're talking about 5,000 people, that's a culture change. We didn't really know how we were going to address that culture. We did conduct that survey, and we found out the ability of paramedics to interpret proper areas of the EKG, ST segments, J points, and et cetera was above 95%. So we realized the need for primary 12-lead education was not necessary. Actually, 92% of all paramedics that responded to the survey had completed a 12-lead program in the 12 months prior to the survey, as opposed to hospital staff where the average was greater than 2 years. So we decided to focus the majority of our education plan on STEMI processes with some supplemental EKG information on how to interpret EKGs. These are the two workbooks we created. They're somewhat identical. We created an EMS workbook as well as a hospital workbook. The focus of these workbooks are all process-driven, providing common terminology, common information as far as the importance of the early EKG, both in triage or by EMS, early activation of the cath lab by EMS, by cell phone or transmitting, or in the hospital by a single paging unit to activate the cath lab and interventionalist, all the way down to minimizing treatments or increasing the speed to the cath lab while maintaining the patient in a clinically stable position. We actually used an incentive program to distribute these workbooks. They're only 3 pages long. And the last page is actually a tear-off, fill-in-the-blank test. When we tried to figure out how we're going to educate 6,000 people, we realized we really could not do it over the internet or with internet-based programs, and we went down to putting a piece of paper in their hands. For every individual that actually completed this workbook, they were eligible to receive a $10 Visa gift card that we created to try and get absolute wide distribution of our education content. In addition to that, for every individual that an agency or a hospital submitted in a test for, they received a $20 per employee stipend to offset the cost of implementing the education, the cost of overtime, and et cetera, to ensure that we had full density and full impact of the information across Dallas County. Through a combination of grant funds as well as some funds provided by HSAID North Texas Division, actually at the current time, 23 of the 24 EMS agencies are now capable of transmitting 12-lead EKGs. We actually had one agency inside of Dallas County that was not capable of completing a diagnostic 12-lead EKG, and we used grant funding to purchase them 2 12-lead EKG monitors. One of the joys on the grant is we do receive every single EKG that's transmitted inside of Dallas County. Myself and the hospital liaison, it's about 80 EKGs a day. The good news is we currently know about 2 STEMIs occur per day in Dallas County, so we're able to do a front-end QI/QA loop. As soon as we recognize that a STEMI's occurred, we can contact the EMS administrator or the hospital and go ahead and begin that QA loop as soon as the case actually occurs. Data matters. This was a big insight for us. We actually retained an out-of-market firm to do our data analysis for us. We used the UT School of Public Health in Houston, and thanks to Dr. Langenbeer and Dr. Delafrane, who provide all of our epidemiology and reports, we do use the Action Registry Get With the Guidelines data repository, and then it's submitted, downloaded, if you will, into Houston for complete analysis. I just brought a little summary of our Q2 data just to kind of give you a little bit of insight. We had a complete 668 cases in Dallas County, that's STEMI and non-STEMI combined. We actually only evaluate complete cases where we have full data. That's including all 15 hospitals and 24 agencies. 234 STEMIs were noted, 434 non-STEMIs are noted, and our denominator for overall analysis was the 155 complete primary PCI cases, and that's going to be EMS activated cases. STEMI and total patient volumes overall since October 10th, since we began gathering data, a little bit creepy, but we found 68 patients 4 months pretty much in a row there. We saw the dip in overall volume as we anticipated in February, just due to literally just a couple shorter days in the month. And this is our blinded hospital comparison. We elected, because obviously the hospitals are very interested in what the other hospitals are doing, and they look at the data trying to figure out what their number is. We did a volume of greater than or less than, so that way we didn't have a hospital with one PCI case showing up as our number one person on the lists. But we can see here we ranked all 15 hospitals. Each individual hospital actually knows their representative number. And then you can see in the far right column, this is where it starts to get kind of interesting. And we do share unblinded data as well. We rank them by door to balloon times. And as we continue to build our data set, we actually have Dr. Langenbeer dividing this out to systems with greater than 10 cases versus systems with less than 10 cases, so it's a true comparison as far as overall treatment. Similar slide, this is our door to balloon times plotted by agency, left to the right on the bottom. The median's going to be in the blue with the red dot going to be mean. We're actually trying to get the agencies to obviously put their mean and median as close as possible. We know the outliers will skew the mean, so we truly measure the median. But same thing, if you look towards the bottom of the slide, you can see that overall they're rated by volume of less than 10 or greater than 10 cases. We are measuring EMS performance statistics. This has been a tremendous challenge. I will assure you that working with 7 different EPCR vendors representing our 24 EMS agencies, that trying to download the EMS data and then match it with the hospital data was functionally impossible. Our first quarter, we matched 10% of the records. Our second quarter, 50%, and I'm very excited to say this last quarter, we actually matched 100% of our PCI patients. The interesting thing about this is obviously we have data abstractors in the hospital who are entering the information on the hospital behalf, and it's very specific information because those are patients that present and go to the cath lab. However, in the EMS reports, we were not able to download one particular subset of calls, such as calls originating in chest pain or shortness of breath. We had everything from left ankle pain to headache to joint pain, you name it. So we actually had to start downloading every single EMS call, which for 24 agencies is around 50,000 calls a month, and then complete the analysis from there. The EMS agencies are finally starting to find this stuff really, really interesting. We do have a pretty good set of data here because we finally had a complete match of all of our EMS data with the hospital records. This is one of our new slides we just found in quarter 2 as we're measuring all 3 quarters of data. We are showing in our system PCI patients that have an EMS activation versus those who do not receive approximately a 16-minute shorter door-to-balloon time. Of course, that does meet statistical significance. Once again, these are just preliminary data as we continue to measure for the next 4 quarters of data. STEMI admissions in Dallas, this is one of those interesting things as we look at volume overall. We were very surprised to find that Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we haven't run any statistical significance figures on these yet because we want to flesh out some more data first, are significantly higher. The interesting thing about that is going to be actual treatment time. So we notice that 21% of overall cases occur on Tuesday as well as on Thursday. However, the difference between door-to-balloon times is significantly different on basically exact volume days between Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're trying to build, which is statistically significant. We're formulating hypotheses on this, and I know it sounds a little bit odd, but we're working through it ourselves, is employee translocation of desire. Thursday is a busy day, it's the end of the week. And it's really the only truly thing that we can sit there and contribute as we kind of build around these numbers and try to figure out why we see such a difference in door-to-balloon times. And those are all primary PCI STEMI cases. Those do not include elective cases or heavy volumes. I know this slide's very difficult to read because it has a lot of information on here. This is our unblinded data. And what we do is we actually show our top 30 door-to-balloon performances. And that includes patients that walk in or patients that arrive by EMS. So we actually have hospitals completely unblinded on the left side of the volume, left side of the column, and it has the EMS agency, and it includes their total time. So this is something that's really interesting to put up in front of our audience. We have about 240 active volunteers on the grant, and the CEOs and presidents of our hospitals love this information. As you can imagine, it's a highly competitive environment in Dallas County, and we put this up there to kind of show who's working best with each other. The key metric of our grant is actually symptom onset to arterial reperfusion, the total ischemic time. And so we actually award each quarter the top performer for EMS and hospital activated patients. Quarter 1 of 2011 was a 52-year-old male who fortunately contacted 911 12 minutes after the onset of his chest pain. 14-minute total EMS contact time with an 18-minute door-to-balloon time. So overall, his symptom onset to arterial reperfusion was a total time of 43 minutes. We consider that to be extreme. We see our average right now at 162 minutes. But we use SOAR time in our actual award category because we're encouraging the hospitals to go out and do advocacy and patient information, patient education in their environment. We know that most patients occur within a 5 concentric mile around their hospital, so we encourage them to activate 911 or go to their hospital, et cetera, when they have chest pain. Our current threat assessment is we're basically halfway through the grant. Culture change, that's going to be it. We hear that, but we've always done it this way. We've had some very heated and very fun subcommittees. It's been a lot of interest. Under and over triage of STEMI patients has been an interesting one. We've actually banned the term of false activation. We kind of call it activation that doesn't emergently go to the cath lab. It's not running raw off the tongue real well, but we're trying to find some sort of heavy balance there. ED and interventional participation has been key. We've actually created a physician advisory board inside of the grant that involves interventional cardiologists from around Dallas County. Continuing education, of course, public awareness, accurate data is huge, and the big question we ask right now is sustainability. If we build it, will they stay? The key concepts to how we've been able to accomplish what we have and what we keep moving forward is data. Realistically, that is. We found it was a huge challenge inside of our 15 hospitals to find data abstractors at maybe 0.2 FTE, but if you're lucky to find a 0.5 FTE, and then actually have them entering accurate data. The first quarter of our data analysis in 2010 was very challenging because we found great issues. They were entering the cases as they could, but many of them fell out of the analysis category because the information was simply just not complete or wouldn't be usable. So we've had to continuously go back and work with our data abstractors. We found that using blinded and unblinded data has worked good for our system. The hospitals feel some sort of sense of competition. We encourage them, obviously, advocacy and efficacy and patient safety first. We're not looking for the 2-minute door-to-balloon time, which we know pretty much can occur. And we've obviously reached a plateau where we know it's not going to get any shorter. Robust overall data, and then we do use the action registry to get with the guidelines for our system. That's the end of the presentation. I'll entertain any questions.
What's your false activation rate?
False activation rate is something that's been tricky. We're right now about 16%. It's difficult for us to measure because we truly don't know who measures the false activation. We have seen cases where a patient has a pacemaker, et cetera, and the paramedics activate, but the true definition of a false activation has kind of been left in a very gray area in our system, but we see it about 1.6 out of 10 cases overall. We hope that the trick is for our system, we didn't want to penalize the paramedics in the systems if we had a patient that went to the cath lab, within a couple hours, but didn't go emergently to the cath lab, because we realized even if a patient was held in the ED for 20 minutes before going to the cath lab, that's still a good system performance time. So it's been a delicate balance with the paramedics in the system.
So are the paramedics activating the cath labs, or is that still going through the ED, or how does that work?
The paramedics are capable of activating the cath labs. We encourage a double attack. They transmit the EKG, and then we encourage them to contact the receiving center at the patient's bedside if they can. We use the terminology of code STEMI, and we've applied that through all the systems. We do have several agencies that use a common medical control dispatch center, which is called BioTel. Similarly, they transmit the EKG, it goes to BioTel, and then BioTel will activate the case through their common medical control center.
And then for those who might be interested in more information or being able to download the protocols or the handbook, would you cite the website where those are housed?
Yes, exactly. Our website is www.heart.org/Caruth, C-A-R-U-T-H. And actually Monday, during the body of the conference, I'll do a 50-minute complete presentation on the Caruth grant, which includes all of our data set for review.
How did you get all of the EMS agencies and hospitals connected so that they can transmit and receive their 12 leads?
That's an excellent question. We actually end up using the LifeNet system inside of Dallas County. We have what's called the Dallas Stakeholder Committee, which is essentially our Congress. It's one voting member from every hospital and every EMS agency. We stuck them in one room, and everybody pretty much agreed to one thing. It was difficult, and getting the EKG transmission up has been difficult. The good news is, even though we have 25 EMS agencies, each EMS agency only respectively transmits to 2 or 3 primary hospitals, so we only had to set them up for those links. The good news is once the LifeNet system was in place, was that they entered the protocols into the computer system to where they're actually transmitting the EKGs to the cath lab and to the interventionalist if it meets certain criteria based on interpretation.
Who funded the LifeNet system? Was it part of the grant monies?
Yes, we used about $55,000 worth of grant fundings for portions of the LifeNet system. The other pre-hospital LifeNet was purchased through HCA North Texas prior to the beginning of the grant, but the remainder of the hospitals actually used their own internal funds to purchase the LifeNet systems for their individual hospitals.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're getting a lot of data. Next thing on the agenda, actually, Richard, do you have anything to tell us about the ECC STEMI guideline, or not yet? Not yet, okay. This committee, I think, has got a little bit of a reputation for having run long and not leaving enough time for general public comment, but this time, we have plenty of time for the public to comment. I want to apologize earlier for our running short on this. Invite folks to come up to the microphone and make comment on anything we've discussed today. Well, come on, what do you think of our rule change recommendations? That sounded like a groan. Come on. Just say who you are, where you're from, and fire away.
Christine Reeves, I'm the Executive Director for Heart of Texas RAC in Waco. And Wanda's question was, where are the recommendations that we can read them? Because you went very, very fast.
Yeah.
They're not recommendations,
Yeah. Suggestions. I have one concern, which is the requirement of all 911 providers to have 12 lead EKGs. And in my region, I have several BLS only 911 providers.
Well, it was I'm pretty sure we said ALS, right?
When you
We
read it
put
out loud,
it in the
said 911.
ALS provider piece. We did not
Yeah.
put it in the BLS provider piece because we had to put it in each individual section.
Okay.
So it's
'cause
in
when
the
you read it
ALS
out,
piece.
You said all 911 units.
You're
So
right,
I
but
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, but it was within the ALS section of the rule, but
Okay.
I
Then
didn't make that clear.
The second part to that is even my ALS providers can't afford 12 leads. I'm a small RAC. We don't have the funds to purchase 12 leads for them. We've been working on our 12 lead project for 6 years now, trying to get 12 leads in all of our units. So for it to be in rule as a requirement for services is going to prove to be very difficult, I'm sure, not only in my region, but in other regions.
Yeah, and I think committee members jump in. We discussed that to some degree. The thought was, and this may be, as I recall, and this may not be a good one, but you know, for those who fund your organizations, sometimes they only fund what is required, and if it becomes required, then they may be able to come up with the funding for you. But we do know that in some areas that the dollars are tight everywhere. I mean, I come from a big urban area, but it's, you know, just because I'm from a big urban area and our total budget is many, many millions doesn't mean I can get things easily. I mean, we've got to fight for everything. And I find that if it's mandatory, sometimes my bosses then understand they have to find it. So that was, at least that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know, committee members, if anybody wants to. But at the end of the day, sorry, go ahead.
That's exactly right. I mean, we think it's the right thing to do, and so if we put it in as a suggestion, and whoever decides on these things agree that it's a reasonable suggestion, then it'll have to be confronted and dealt with. There are lots of ways of dealing with this, as you probably know. I mean, I would assume you have big hospitals in your area, and I would assume the big hospitals are interested in STEMI care. Our hospital actually bought 30 12-lead ECG machines and put them on all the then EMS units back in 1996. So hospitals can do this. There are other ways of getting things funded than getting it through the state. So I think that's something that ought to be pursued.
One of the other things that was discussed at length during that meeting was it would be very unfair to the people of Texas to say if you live here, you get this kind of quality of care with 12-lead transmission, early activation, and you get into the cath lab in an expedited manner. But if you live here, you don't get the same treatment. So requiring it, I think, took a lot of discussion on our parts, but it is the right thing to do.
So look at it like we're trying to help you get your bosses to fund you the way you should have been funded in the first place. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay. So it looks like we'll be finishing a little bit early. Committee members, anybody got anything they want to bring up? No? So look around the table? No? Well, one thing is, this is my last meeting as the chair, and I think that we've gotten off to a fairly decent start. We're getting data, which is important, and we're starting to be getting some good data and finding out where the data's got gaps, and so that's good. We've got a long way to go. I'll be handing over the gavel, both literally and figuratively, to Dr. Smalling, who'll be coming in as chair. And perhaps, Dr. Smalling, you can tell us if you have any thoughts about where we may be going over the next 3 years.
Thank you, David. I think we all owe David a round of applause for a superb job. For those of you who don't know him, he is completely tireless and completely overcommitted, but really focuses on what the right thing to do is for patients with acute problems, not only cardiac, but I have to believe his heart is in the cardiac realm. So that said, he also helped set up the first pre-hospital 12-lead program, to my knowledge, in Texas a long time ago, back in '96. We've been talking amongst ourselves and amongst interested parties outside this committee for several years now about how to get things done. And as part of that, we've also talked with the people in North Carolina who worked in ways separate from the legislature. They did parallel activities with the legislature in North Carolina, but it turns out that a lot of the work was done outside that. And then there was a combination of efforts. And I think in Texas, probably a good example of that is in San Antonio, where they have a tremendous STEMI network organized, and it was done without any significant funding. So I think in Texas we're blessed with a number of people that have the energy and the vision to say this is the right thing to do, and let's get it done one way or another. This loose-knit group of people largely stems from Dr. Wozniak's early effort in conducting STEMI meetings, and then picked up with Dr. Mixon and his associates with the STEMI, what amounts to STEMI Summit, which they typically held annually in August. And at those programs, there was a big opinion, a sense of agreement that there has to be a data system in Texas. A lot of discussion about where it might reside. Interestingly, the School of Public Health has continually surfaced. Caruth's used that. There are several groups within the School of Public Health, it turns out, and trying to get them to talk to one another will be a good challenge for us, but I think that's possible. Legislative mandates will have to be pursued, and we hope to partner. I think the Heart Association will have to lead the way there, and certainly all of you who are interested are welcome to contact Joel and Lonnie and others to volunteer for those efforts. Fundraising is going to be key. We've talked about ways of raising money outside of state funding, which obviously won't be available for this particular issue for a while, and how long that is we don't know, but the Caruth effort is an outstanding example of how that could work, and hopefully other communities could be creative and do similar things. We also think that clinical trials will resurface as it becomes clear that you have to reperfuse patients as soon as possible. The term SOAR has been brought up by the Dallas Caruth group. We call it ischemic time. I mean, it's the same thing. Basically, get the arteries open as soon as possible, however you can do that. And clinical trials to prove that principle I think will emerge in the very near future. So hopefully that will be another source of potential funding to help continue this effort. So those are the things that I see that are percolating. I'd welcome going down the table to hear other thoughts. Robert, you want to add to that?
Well, I think that if you're just looking at it all in its entirety, I think that if you look at the pre-hospital phase, I think that that's going to require a lot of work still in terms of symptom recognition, public awareness campaigns, as well as trying to use our EMS as efficiently, as wisely as possible, from increasing the education to the centers that are not maybe known to have the depth and the of education available that some of the urban centers do, as well as a perfect example here of trying to assist in obtaining needed equipment so everybody in Texas gets the standard of care that we would expect. So I would just add to your list those elements as well.
Karen, you've done a great job in Dallas. Can you talk about that?
Thank you. One of the things that I've noticed in working with the Caruth grant is that we have to do more public awareness campaigns, and I think that's going to be our next step with Caruth, and I really want to see that effort. Once we have some funding somewhere, I want to see that effort expand outside Dallas County, because it has just opened our eyes so much. Not only the way we transport people and our contact with the hospital, but encouraging people to call 911 as opposed to driving 45 minutes on their own and then having possibly to sit in the waiting room. So it's really been helpful for us, and I'd like to see everybody get to share that.
David, you want? Lonnie has been a firebrand in this effort, and really has worked hard with us in Houston over the past several years, and has pushed our SETRAC organization hard, successfully, I might add. Lonnie, can you add some comments?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I also would really like to thank Dr. Peirce. Dr. Peirce had the very difficult job of leading this effort from the very beginning, and bringing a very diverse group of people together to become more focused. I'm really excited about the work that's been accomplished over the last couple of years and the work that we have ahead of us. So appreciate the work that you've done, and you're going to continue to be part of the committee moving forward as well. So I really don't have anything to add in terms of items that we need to work on in the future. I think everybody's done a good job of identifying what those things are. So.
Well, we also are blessed to have Christine Uhas on the committee, and Christine is a veteran in legislative efforts and also setting up STEMI programs around the country, and so she knows how to get it done. Christine?
I think it's been a great couple of years since we started the committee, and I really appreciate Dr. Peirce because he kept this committee focused in the right direction. And what you're seeing with all this data, that we are getting our data, we are getting our ducks in a row, we're playing by the American Heart latest, greatest guidelines, we're looking to the ACC for guidance. You're going to see Texas as a huge leader in cardiac systems of care, because we're doing it based on where we are, what we see, what our geography is, and what's out there right now. Some of the latest, greatest things that Dr. Smalling is talking about that they're doing in Minnesota is very exciting for the state of Texas with the half-dose lytic therapies. We are so big, there is no way in some places we're going to make a 90-minute window. We might not even make a 120-minute window. So I applaud the entire committee, because I think that we took a step back. We looked at where we were going, we put our ducks in a row, we got our data, and we said, now, after we have our data and we know the direction we need to go, we know where our state is at, now we're going to take it there. So I think it's been an excellent couple of years, and we're doing a lot of great work. Slow but sure.
Thank you. And Josie, the EMT piece is so critical in all this. You want to comment on that?
I think as EMS personnel, 12-lead capabilities are going to be a pretty big challenge for small areas But like you stated, going to the state and going to our hospital boards and our hospitals to help fund these is something our EMS right now is trying to do. So hopefully everyone will get on the same ground as we are and try to get everything that we need on the trucks, 12 lead wise. So.
Great.
Just adjourn the meeting? Any other comments? I'm going to make you adjourn the meeting. You get, there it is. You are now the chair.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.